Hi, this is Alex, co-founder and CEO of UMH, and today we are here with another episode of the Connected Factory podcast. In the last episodes, we talked a lot about how to pitch it to the management, how to get OT and IT architects and users into the play. But one often quite overlooked perspective is how to now enable the shop floor workers or the frontline operators with the insights, the workflows that you actually build with the data infrastructure. Therefore, we have a really good guest with us. It's Natan, co-founder and CEO, among other things, of Tulip, and he will provide a quite special perspective on the topic. So let's jump right in. Hi, Natan. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Alex. Good to see you again.
So I think everybody or most of our audience already know us and know you and Tulip, etc. So now get a little bit back into your origins. I saw that you're coming from Israel. There you headed like an R&D center, then did your PhD and at MIT, and now co-founded after that 2 companies, and quite a ride. And what would, just to get started, what would you say is the most memorable experience doing that?
I think, at the time so I started companies since I was in my 20s. And I think you're talking about the 2 most recent ones, which is Formlabs and Tulip. Those, they have a dialogue between them, but there were companies that wanted to change the status quo in what tools engineers are actually using to do their jobs. And so in the case of Formlabs, which is a 3D printing company, we make printers, materials, software, and a whole ecosystem that allow you to create anything basically with additive manufacturing.
Mm.
And the key was to make it routinely accessible, so very good feature to functionality and materials ratios in the case of Formlabs. Tulip was born with the intention to bring first-class tools to folks in operations. So we're talking about industrial process engineers of all sorts. They could be working more on the quality side or safety or lean operational excellence. The people who actually set up production lines, environments. So they may be setting up warehouse and logistics or running laboratories. Basically, not people who spend their time just in behind their laptop in some office. And they work in the physical world. They are operating complex manufacturing technology, whether it's machines or equipment of all sorts, robotics and so on, and they live in sort of an abundance of data decision making in this dynamic environment. So for those people, they've been deprived of the original digital transformation revolution, So of course we've had a lot of technology coming in from the automation, the revolution, and on. So I don't know where you want to put the marker, in the 80s and on. But they definitely, were left behind when the web emerged, when cloud technology emerged, and what that did for how the world develops and adopts software at scale. And the thing that was missing when we started Tulip is that there was no platform. There was no sort of a horizontal platform that can span not only the use cases, whether you're doing MES-like things like, production visibility, tracking, routing, things like that, or quality purposes, whatever it is, or training or inventory. The list of use cases is very, very endless, but also across the verticals. So, every operation, whether it's in specialty vehicles or luxury good or tooling or discrete manufacturing for that matter, or hybrid discrete where you have batch process manufacturing in biopharma, and then it gets pretty specific like aerospace, defense, medical device. They all need the same things. And to think that there's no platform when you live in a world that there's Salesforce for the commercial folks and there's Workday for the HR people, and I can go on, but it's just unreasonable. So that's what Tulip came to build, and so it's the platform has no code, low code, AI first sort of approach to this, and fundamentally just changes how people work and therefore changing their organization, and that yields a different approach to digital transformation, which is what people like to say. But, I like to kind of destroy those buzzwords at the risk of inventing new. So, I don't love this term digital transformation anyway. So we can maybe talk about that later.
I think also like a lot of like manufacturing is not the, I would say, easiest place to build something scalable. Yeah. So like the complexity and the variance is enormous. Like every consumer app, like sales app, finance app, yeah, there's a variance to it, but manufacturing is ridiculous, like across verticals, etc. So I think what Tulip did right. So we were like one of the first people, I think, actually in Europe back then, as we had a system integrator, implementing that in a learning factory. And what we really liked and struck with us was it puts the actual worker at the center versus having something that is put top down in place and that you need to work with versus you invent the application to really fuel your work processes. And yeah, I think this is what we really need.
This human-centric approach is actually coupled with a lot of architectural decisions that we made early on and stick by them, and they're critical. And I'm specifically talking about the introduction of composable architecture in the technical sense to this world of operation. And I totally agree with you, Alex, that the complexity comes from basically an infinite matrix of, n machines times x protocols times y connectors times dot dot dot, all the backend systems that you need to integrate with. And the thing with operations, and I kind of said it before, it's a dynamic environment. So in other words, non-composable environments is almost like making the decisions that you have all the possibilities of what your software needs to deal with the day you started to implement. And that's obviously, in the world we live in, is irrational. Like it's a recipe for failure. And that has held back the OT side of the house, and like having real programs that evolve with the needs of the company, whether they start a new factory or need to deal with cutting in tons of engineering changes, or the supply chain is reconfiguring, which is something I think we're all experiencing now. And in all that sort of, call it operational reality, what you need to do is like get the work done. And what do you need to do for that? Set up a new workflow, collect more data, analyze, and do it quickly, and so on. And if you're doing it with what I call, non-composable or finite approach, then you are pretty much doomed. There's no better way to say it that feels nice. It's doomed because you're fundamentally slow. You're talking about different cost curves that are in the millions, and timelines that are in the years. And no company, I'm not talking about the small and medium businesses. This is not our focus. Our focus, Tulip, has been an enterprise shop forever. But they've been, they just cannot afford this anymore. They're not getting the skills and the change of their workforce, and at the same time, they're not scaling up the call it complexity of dealing with data, and this is where the cloud comes in. And I think everybody, post-COVID got the memo, and now with our very complex world, I think that memo is even more relevant. That you cannot run a responsibly organization that would deal with all the competitive tensions, the need to produce on time, on quality, and get to the market. You cannot run with this old approach for architectures.
You hang up yourself in complexity. What we really, so we are not yet that long in the market as Tulip, but when we were starting, it was always about even in an industrial setting, you develop shop floor applications like you would do with an ERP. So you put yourself out of the mercy of a system integrator, like did a 2-year project, millions in system integration, but already put like processes in place that are rigid, because if you need to change them, you need to flip some more months and some more millions into the system integrator to adjust it to your new, and doing that on a cash to order or whatever ERP like use case. Okay, there you have like a certain like predictability about how things evolve, but in manufacturing, you redo a line, redo a product, everything changes. Redo your supply chain, redo your inventory. This is something that needs to be in the place of the people.
Yeah, totally right. Unlike the landscape of ERP, where I think it's easier to predict how your P&L would look like in 5 years, or your cash to order process or procurement. You still need to optimize it, but it's kind of known, and also requires a bit of rigidity, certainly in large enterprises. The idea that you would use the same approach in operation, it goes back to what I said before, complexity and total cost of ownership, that always the budget go up. you know. What I like and what we see in Tulip is like scalability, not just because, you know, this is like pay as you go, implement. You can start with 10 stations and you can go whole full enterprise. But the idea that at some point at least on the system integration component, if the workforce is becoming true citizen developers that are capable of doing this on their own because they have the context and they understand what they're doing, and they're coupled with the tools. And by the way, it's not just Tulip in this new industrial stack. Then your cost of system integration is dropping, because if you're 3 years into this journey, you know, you can do, let's just say, like, give you two choices, like, here's 3 years journey where vendor X that provides MESY or whatever gives you a project and you go live. So great, you've done that, and okay, good job. But the other approach is 3 years and you've trained literally hundreds of people that are now capable to work in this new industrial stack that you've defined.
Yeah.
And they can incrementally take on projects that maintain and improve your operation without relying on a lot of system integration, without sacrificing governance and, you know, all the security, which is critical. And when it's done on the cloud, they can, you know, quite easily, as compared to before, scale it and deal with all the necessary things that good enterprise IT demands, and for good reasons. Yeah.
So create a clear structure around governance around the platform, and then let the people do it. I think this is also something that like a lot of customers of us feared, like saying, oh, we now expose ourselves to new technologies or a new approach, and we don't have anyone trained on it yet. But in our like in our experiences, like there are people who want to do something new, something different, and they will now emerge from the mass of the people and also create ownership. And if you combine that with a rigid structure about what he is able to do, what he's not able to do, and what is his like guardrails, this is quite a powerful approach to like save on cost like 10x.
Yeah, at least. And the fear is always a great excuse to do nothing or stay within the confines of whatever comfort zone, but it's definitely not the way to solve for your real needs to to innovate, basically. Because operations is not just the end of your R&D process, whatever product you're making. It's an integral part of it. Production lines are products that you can build them, and they can be an amazing power multiplier, or they can be just like the weak link in the end of a chain of huge R&D investment. And so it doesn't make any sense not to take this approach that is very aggressive on the technology. And you see the companies who changed stuff in the past decade or so, and here in the US, of course, everybody talks about SpaceX and Tesla, but there are many others, with the new EV companies, or one of our great customers, Skydio, and there's like other companies like that in around the globe. But they've vertically integrated a lot of their operation, and especially when they're doing organic manufacturing as opposed to contract manufacturing. They're not just asset lean and like they're kind of outsourcing their operational end of their factory. We're gonna take care of the whole process, and this is what would make our product better. We can then better support, we can distribute it differently, and they're changing the game. And I think the numbers are going to speak for itself. And
I think if you also like look, we're from Germany, and if you look at our automotive OEMs versus the Chinese ones, like they pump out new models every 6 to 9 months. Like Germany will not be able to like set up a new line in that time. Like in their time, they fully iterate through a product. Yeah.
That is exactly right, and that is and again, we've talked about this before, but this is why trying to get people to think in this new open ecosystem approach that allows you to integrate a lot of technologies and move faster. So that's one facet of it. But when you really think deeply, like, what do companies need to do? Because okay, we're talking about the problems, maybe people are wondering, well, what's the general approach for thinking differently? And it's not just picking an architecture, because that's an element of starting to work on this new solution, right, or this new approach, I think it lies in the realm of designing, implementing new type of production systems. And a production system, and this back to automotive, obviously stems from the origins of lean, and where Toyota production system was invented, perfected, and then was, I think, propagated over the past 40 years around the globe. And the first principles of lean are still true, are still widely used, whether you do this formally or not, whether you have an operational excellence that believe in this variant of lean or that approach to Six Sigma or whatever it is. But the fundamentals are the same. You're doing waste, reduce waste and move the value to the customer. You're continuously improving, so Kaizen. You're respecting the people doing the work and giving them the best tools, and so on and so forth. And so while those first principles are the same, the tools to implement them are no longer the whiteboard and the clipboard or the spreadsheet or the highly integrated whatever 5 pieces of software you bought 10 years ago that whomever, some system integrator put together. It has to be a different type of a production system. It needs to be more dynamic. It's fundamentally digital native. It needs to be open, back to the ecosystem approach we were talking about. It needs to think about the people who are taking a part in that new production system as true knowledge workers. And in other words, and this is again, sometimes people don't like that I say that, but like if you say knowledge worker, you're basically saying who is not a knowledge worker. So in fact, we need to stop using this term knowledge worker, because everyone is a knowledge worker. So therefore it's obsolete. And because otherwise you're saying, oh, these people have the knowledge in my organization and they will have knowledge and use data and whatever. And these other people will just will be like human robots of sorts.
Yeah.
And in the world we live in today, definitely in the US, Europe, Japan, and many other countries, we don't have enough humans for operations. Certainly, we don't have enough skilled humans for operations. So organizations cannot afford to think about their workforce as non-knowledge workers. And so if you have all knowledge workers, therefore, you have to give them a new production system. You have to involve them and you have to make them, as much as you can, exist very naturally in a digital environment. And that doesn't, if you implement or adopt like some platform or some whatever software package, that is not enough, because half the battle is not which tech stack you've selected. Half the battle is the change management and getting especially in enterprise, large, multinational corporations with hundreds of factories across the globe that need to change. Otherwise, they become obsolete. So. I think this is the most critical thing, is like designing and implementing new digital production systems.
When like double clicking on technology for the sake of it. So if we I take a step back, when we started like the 2015-ish timeframe, also where you already like a few years in the making, it was always like.
No, actually, we stepped out of MIT September 2014, and we started operating. There was a lot of bootstrapping involved in the early days of Tulip, but I think we hired our first salesperson around 2018 or early 2019. So we were like working very, very close to customers in bootstrap mode. Yeah, I mean, you can't build the type of product we wanted to build just based on our assumptions. You had to do it. Tulip, I always say this, like Tulip was born on the shop floor. So it wasn't born in some office, So
I really also think this is a failure pattern of software companies in manufacturing. Having an idea, validate it roughly, and then already starting scaling it, and then you get way less like widget. I think there were like a huge flood of predictive maintenance startups or IoT platforms, which were like in 2017, 18 timeframe that manufacturing is still paper-based, agree, everything is expensive and slow, agree, so let's start throwing money on it. But then you didn't figure it out yet and went in the wrong direction and cannot steer anymore. So fully agree with it. We did the same.
I think the main thing that happened is that while operations manufacturing is different, and we talked about the complexity and all that, but it needs the same things. If you want to run at scale a network of data centers, so you need orchestration, and you need interoperability between the systems, and you need logging, and all the tools that you can imagine to do that well. How is it different? Why should tried, tested, true technologies, whether it's in the protocol side or the open source tooling that we have, like for whatever, for the data visualization or setting up different compute storage that the hyperscalers are giving. Why would that be any different for the massive data problem that operations represent? In my world, the answer is it's a problem of tools. It's a problem like how do you, and sometimes we talk about Tulip, we try to give the same tools that we use to build Tulip, and we're a bunch of software engineers and hardware engineers, to the people who build production lines and labs and whatnot, and those people are engineers, and they need engineering tools. If I take away your GitHub, I don't know, now I guess everyone is using some sort of AI model to code, and some development pipeline of whatever sort, to allow you to continuously deliver software. You can't build a product. You just can't. And how do you close that gap? And so again, to us, it's like thinking about them engineers as first class citizens and giving them the best tools to do the work.
I think it's really a lot about applicability. Yeah, so like data, like time series databases, streaming, message broker, connectivity is really solved since years, but it's still not in place because like people on the shop floor have like a really, really different skill set. They're thinking ladder logic, thinking lean, thinking like value stream, etc. Yeah. They cannot like log into GitHub yet because it feels like awkward to them. So we need to wrap it to make it. And they're also short, like, or close the skill gap that they have. And I think this is something that manufacturing tools need to do on top of technology excellence. Yeah.
And I can give a concrete example, just building on that. For whatever, 20, 30 years, the concept of, the classic historian, like we're going to have a bunch of computers with like RAIDs, with replication sitting on premise with nice cold room that is locked up, the server room, and we'll have data flowing into that, and this is where we will have our data, like the historian data, which is critical if you're you needed to analyze, you needed to adhere to regulation, if you're making a device that needs to go with electronic device history record, all that. It's great. Yeah, I think time series databases and at scale networks with redundancy and failovers can give you 99.9999% uptime, can do the work better, faster, and actually give you better tools to do all these other things that classical historians did. And when we collaborate with companies like, say, Snowflake, for example, then they're coming in with a modern ETL with all the things that comes along with that. And do you need a historian in the classical sense anymore? So for me, the answer is clear. The answer is no. And actually, if you're doing that, you're staying behind.
And it's also so expensive. But I think it's also like an interesting pattern, like all these IT companies, like if it's AWS, like the hyperscalers or specialized data tools, Snowflake or Databricks, like it's for them or MongoDB, it's so hard to get into manufacturing. They also don't understand just give me the data via Kafka or MQTT. And like the way actually getting it there, like from the status quo of whatever you have in your production, is such a hard step for them. So they need to partner. Yeah? They need to partner with us or like alternative tools to really get the data like in shape and in quantity that it really makes use of it. Yeah. So it's a partner approach. And this is also something that Tulip is really embracing, I think, over the last years, really. So what would you say has changed from this? I would say, again, mid of 2010s, everybody's doing full vertical from connectivity to application to now where everybody's more thinking an ecosystem approach.
Yeah. I think we adopted very early on open ecosystem approach. And we just met in Hannover Messe, just to put this in some quick example with numbers, right? At Hannover Messe, we released our edge drivers. I think we released about 700, from vendors that are like across the board. This could be like Zebra and Hexagon, Atlas Copco, all sorts of, because there's so many physical things you have to connect to your endpoints in operations to actually get the job done, whether it's a device measuring something or if it's a machine spitting out information in OPC way. And that is, again, reducing complexity of system integration, and it changes the decision-making process that is often I hear customers saying, well, we can't start doing like, smart workflows that use the AI and the analytics before we connect all the things. And how do you need to connect all the things? And then that kind of starts a snowball of a lot of reasons why not to do things. And I think connectivity is commoditizing. I think this is sort of the real value of an ecosystem. I think that the sort of walls of like, if you're like a developer that lived in whatever, Siemens ecosystem, you just stay there your entire career, or if you're in Rockwell, you stay there your entire career. Like when you really go to the factories and you look at what's out there, you can see the PLCs, multi-vendor, the HMIs, multi-vendors, the data acquisition software, multi-vendor, the tools, various vendors. So you actually have to do that, otherwise you will not support the customers, because the customers will have to integrate so many things themselves. And that's what the power of an open ecosystem is bringing to the market. And I think it's critical to keep that up, and we are very, very, very serious about that.
One, I hopefully inspiring question, or like the elephant in the room for some. So AI is also like already in Hannover Messe, I would say every company has now new two stickers or new two marketing CTAs was AI, obviously, and it was unified namespace, I would say. How would you say will it shape the landscape in 5 years from now, and how does it already impact Tulip now, and what will the Tulip impact like also in 5 years from now? What do you want to build there?
So look, if you were there, we were there together in Hanover, and every single booth had like some AI slogan. So and I recorded a whole podcast with Maddie, our CMO, on this after Hanover. It was my summary is like AI was everywhere and nowhere. That's my summary, because there's such a gap between the proclamations that we're hearing from a lot of companies that say, oh, AI is ready and it's ready for scale and in operations, right? Certainly you can't pass your day without seeing like 5 new posts on LinkedIn saying, oh, here's another agent, here's another tool, here's another way to do whatever in IT land. But in operation, the side effects of using AI, forget, even the ability, the access to actually use it in the context of operational environment. AI not used well can shut down a production line. AI not used well can make you lose a batch of active material in biopharma that is worth millions. So that risk is very much in direct tension with this. AI is ready for scale and ready for impact. It will be, but if it's, and this is sort of our approach, but if it's not designed to be fundamentally human-centric, that allows the people to safely kind of use it to do things that requires trust. So, when we think about AI, we put out our AI composer, and like you can drag a PDF and like it would have a step to like tell you like what is the analysis saying, and like how do you want to turn that SOP that is regulated and so on into an application. Then that's an example where you can create those trusts, much like developers trust whatever cursor is telling them, and they iterate. So I think this will emerge, and a lot of the stuff I've seen, I gotta tell you, it's like repackaging of old stuff, sticking in different disparate AI experiences that go outside, and it's honestly, I think, pretty risky, because you gotta start with sort of AI first as a modality, because everyone in their lives. I'm speaking about like how you would create a presentation for your daughter's birthday. So consumer level people are starting to get very comfortable using this, and then they will go back to their work, and then they're back to not even Google. Sometimes they're still in paper. So operation actually missed the classical web mobile cloud revolution. Now it's on a path to miss the AI revolution, because it's still catching up. A lot of solutions are still, oh, we're doing cloud migration. It's like, great, that was like 15 years ago. So we don't have time for all of this, and I think the urgency is there. This is where we're focused on that, and so this is my answer. What happened in 5 years? Like, I think in 5 years the world is more open, more composable, and AI first, especially for frontline operations. And this is sort of where we see our responsibility to expand the ecosystem and bring people in. And these are what, people are talking about, oh, use this copilot in operation. No, we should be talking about like what kind of MCPs we are using in the world of operation. And that changes, by the way, the term you guys love to talk about, which is UNS, which to me, it's like, yes, it's like an important topic, but nothing new in that sense, because UNS is an abstract concept to me, way of thinking, way of like bringing architectures that were very common for years and years and years in the classic internet, if you like it, to operations. And it's not that it's becoming obsolete. It's becoming overridden by this approach of like, yeah, why do MCPs and the protocols that would synchronize all our models are critical? Because they have the context of what job they're trying to do. So if you're trying to really build agents for operation and give people this ability to use them, you have to think like that. So it's so in a way, it's like a fundamental baseline. And I think it will take less than 5 years, but that's the general direction,
Yeah, inspiring and interesting. I think this will be interesting years. Yeah, so like a lot of things are changing faster than the years before. Like if it's an AI or perhaps also the UNS, if it's a buzzword, we will see, and what applications AI will enable, we will also see. But I think interesting years to come. It was
absolutely
a real pleasure to have you here.
So thanks for having me, Alex. It was great. We should do this again pretty soon.
Definitely. Then wish all guests and heroes like a great time, and stay tuned for the next episodes.